Hi everyone, and welcome back to another session of me reading The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This session, we are going to be starting chapter 12, and I think I mentioned it before, but we are going to be splitting that into two parts. So this is part one, and I am going to be uploading these both together because unfortunately when I split these up half and half, we end up right in the middle of a cliffhanger. I'm so sorry about all that. So I am going to be recording both of these and uploading them at the same time so that you guys don't have any issues of what happens next. So for right now, we're going to get started with the first half of chapter 12. And if you guys remember last time that we met in chapter 11, they found out when Durin's Day was, and they were able to open the secret door on the side of the mountain. And so now they're all kind of standing there going, well, what are we going to do? So this is where we are, and we are going to start here. For a long time, the dwarves stood in the dark before the door and debated, until at last Thorin spoke. Now it is the time for our esteemed Mr. Baggins, who has proved himself a good companion on our long road, a hobbit so full of courage and resource, far exceeding his size, and if I may say so, possessed of a good luck far from exceeding the usual allowance. Now is the time for him to perform the service for which he was included in our company. Now is the time for him to earn his reward. You are familiar with Thorin's style on important occasions, so I will not give you any more of it, although he went on for a good deal longer than this. It is certainly an important occasion, but Bilbo felt impatient. By now he was quite familiar with Thorin too, and he knew what he was driving at. If you mean you think it is my job to go into the secret passage first, Thorin, Thrain's son, Oakenshield, may your beard grow ever longer, he said crossly. Say so at once, and I will have it. Say so at once and have done. I might refuse. I have got you out of 2 messes already, which were already in the original bargain, so that I think already owed some reward. But third time pays for all, as my father used to say, and somehow I don't think I shall refuse. Perhaps I have begun to trust my luck more than I used to in the old days, and he meant last spring before he left his house, but it seemed like centuries ago. But anyways, I think I will go and have a peep and get it over with. Now who's coming with me? He did not expect a chorus of volunteers, so he was not disappointed. Fili and Kili looked uncomfortable and stood on one leg, but the others made no pretense of even offering. Except old Balin, the lookout man, who was rather fond of the Hobbit. He said he would come inside, at least, and perhaps a bit of the way, ready to call for help, if necessary. The most that can be said for the dwarves is this. They intended to pay Bilbo really handsomely for his services. They had not brought him along, but they had brought him along to do a nasty job for them, and they did not mind the poor little fellow doing if he would, but they would have all done their best to get him out of trouble, if he had gotten into it, as they did in the case of the trolls at the beginning of their adventures, before they had any particular reason for being grateful to him. There it is. Dwarves are not heroes, but calculating folk with a great idea of value of money. Some are trickery and treacherous and pretty bad lots. Some, but not all. But some are decent people like Thorin and the company if you don't expect too much. So if you guys can kind of glean this, they hired Bilbo to go in and sneak into this little hole in the side of the mountain to go see if Smaug was still alive. That was the job that he was hired for. And even though they really do like him and they will help him out, they don't want to go do this. That is the reason that they hired him for the job. The stars were coming out behind him in a pale sky barred with black when the Hobbit crept through the enchanted door and stole into the mountain. It was far easier than he expected. It was no goblin entrance at the height of their wealth and skill. It was no goblin entrance or rough wood elves' cave. This was a passage made by dwarves at the height of their wealth and skill, straight as a ruler and smooth floored and smooth sided, going on a gentle, never varying slope direction to some distant end with the blackness below. After a while, Bilbo bade Bilbo good luck and stopped where he was so that he could still see the faint outline of the door, and by a trick of the echoes in the tunnel, hear the rustle of the whispering voices just outside. Then the Hobbit slipped on his ring, and warned by the echoes to take more than a Hobbit's care to make no noise, he crept noiselessly down into the dark. He was trembling with fear, but his little face was set and grim. Already he was a very different hobbit from the one that had run out with a pocket handkerchief from Bag End so long ago. He had not had his pocket handkerchief for ages. He was loosening his dagger in its sheath, tightening his belt, and he went on. That's kind of an interesting character development if you consider that Bilbo at the beginning of this journey was a very soft, genial hobbit who just spent his time in his little hole, but now who got very upset that his only pocket square was missing and he had to go on this adventure. And now he's kind of like, if I gotta go into the dragon's cave, I guess I gotta go. So that's kind of interesting to see his whole adventure kind of laid out for you guys to see his character development. Now you are in for it at last, Bilbo Baggins, he said to himself. You went and put your foot right in the night of that party, and now you have to go and pull it out and pay for it. Dear me, what a fool I was and what a fool I am, said at least the Tookish part of him. I have absolutely no use for dragging guarded treasures, and the whole lot could stay here forever and ever. If only I could wake up and find this beastly tunnel was my own front hall at home. He did not wake up, of course, but went on still till the sign of the door behind him faded away. He was altogether alone. Soon he thought it was beginning to feel warm. Is that a kind of glow I see coming right ahead of down here, he thought. It was. As he went forward, it grew and grew until there was no doubt about it. It was a red light, steadily getting redder and redder. It was now undoubtedly hot in the tunnel. Wisps of vapor floated up past him, and he began to sweat. A sound, too, began to throb in his ears, a sort of bubbling like a noise of a large pot galloping on the fire, mixing with rumble as a gigantic tomcat purring. This grew to the unmistakable gurgling noise of some vast animal, snoring in its sleep down there in the red glow in front of him. It was at this point that Bilbo stopped. Going on from there was the bravest thing he ever did. The tremendous thing that happened afterwards, there was nothing to compare to it. He fought the real battle in the tunnel alone before he ever saw the vast danger that lay in wait. At any rate, after a short halt to go on, he did. And if you can picture him coming to the end of a tunnel, an opening much the same size and shape as the door above, through it peeps the hobbit's little head. Before him lies the great bottommost cellar or dungeon hall of the ancient dwarves, right at the mountain root. It is almost dark, so the vastness can only be seen dimly below. But rising from near side of the rocky floor is a great glow, the glow of Smaug. There he lay, a fast red golden dragon, fast asleep. A thrumming came from his jaws, his nostrils, and wisps of smoke, but his fires were low in slumber. Beneath him, under all of his limbs, and his huge coiled tail, and about him on all sides, stretching away across unseen floors, lay countless piles of precious things, gold wrought and unwrought, gems and jewels, and silver red stained in the ruddy light. Smaug lay with wings folded like an immeasurable bat, turned partly on one side so that the hobbit could see his underparts and his long, pale belly crusted with gems and fragments and gold from his long lying on his costly bed. Behind him, where the walls were nearest, he could dimly see the coats of mail, helms and axes, swords and spears hanging, and there were rows stood in great jars and vessels filled with a wealth that could not be guessed. To say that Bilbo's breath was taken away was no description at all. There were no words left to express his staggerment, since the men had changed language that they had learned of elves in those days, when all the world was wonderful. Bilbo had heard tell and sing of dragon hordes before, yet the splendor, the lust, the glory of such treasure had never come home to him. His heart was filled and pierced with the enchantment and with the desire of the dwarves. He gazed motionless, almost forgetting the frightful guardian and the gold beyond price and count. His gaze, for what seemed an age, before drawn almost against his will, he stole from the shadow of the doorway across the floor of the nearest edge of the mounds of treasure. Above him, the sleeping dragon lay, a dire menace even in his sleep. He grasped a great two-handed cup, as heavy as could carry, and cast one fearful eye upward. Smaug stirred a wing, opened a claw, and rumbled. His snoring changed its note. Then Bilbo fled, But the dragon did not wake, not yet, but shifted into other dreams of greed and violence, laying there in his stolen hall while the little hobbit toiled back up the long tunnel. His heart was beating, and a more fevered shaking in his legs than when he had gone down. But still he clutched the cup, and his chief thought was, I've done it. I will show them. More a grocer than a burglar, indeed. Well, we'll hear of that no more. Nor did he. Balin was overjoyed to see the hobbit again, and delighted as he was surprised. He picked Bilbo up and carried him out into the open air, and it was midnight, and clouds had covered the stars, but Bilbo lay, with his eyes shut, gasping and taking pleasure in the feel of the fresh air again, and hardly noticing the excitement of the dwarves, or how they praised and patted him on the back, and put themselves and all their families for generations to come at his service. The dwarves were still passing the cup from hand to hand and talking delightedly of the recovery of their treasure, when suddenly a vast rumble woke up the mountain underneath, as if it was an old volcano that had made up its mind to start erupting once again. The door behind them was pulled nearly to and blocked from the closing with a stone, but with the depths of the tunnel came the dreadful echoes, far from down in the depths, of a bellowing and trampling that made the ground beneath them tremble. Then the dwarves forgot their joy and their confident boasts of a moment before and cowered in fright. Smaug was still to be reckoned with. It does not do to live near a live dragon. It does not do to leave a live dragon out of your calculations, if you live near him. Dragons may not have much real use for all their wealth, but they know it to an ounce of rule, especially after long possession, and Smaug was no exception. He had passed from an uneasy dream in which a warrior, altogether insignificant of size, but provided with a bitter sword and great courage, figured most unpleasantly, to a doze, and from a doze to a wide waking. There was a breath of strange air in his cave. Could there be a draught from a little hole? He had never felt quite happy about it, although it was so small, and he now glared at it with suspicion and wondered why he had never blocked it up. Of late he had half fancied that he had caught the dim echoes of a knocking sound from far above that came down through his lair. He stirred and stretched forth, his neck to stiff. Then he missed the cup. Thieves, fire, murder! Such a thing had not happened since he first came to the mountain. His rage passed description. The sort of rage that is only seen when rich folk have more than they can enjoy and suddenly lose something that they've had long forth and have never used before or wanted. His fire belched forth and the hall smoke. He shook the mountain roots. He thrust his head in vain in the little hole and then coiled his length together, roaring like thunder underground. He sped from his deep lair through its great door and out the huge passages of the mountain place up to the front gate. To hunt the whole mountain till he had caught the thief and had torn and trampled him was one thought. He issued from the gate. The waters rose in fierce whistling steam, and up he soared, blazing into the air, and settled on the mountaintop on a spout of green and scarlet flame. The dwarfs heard an awful rumor of his flight, and they crouched against the walls of the grassy terrace, cringing under boulders, hoping somehow to escape the frightful eyes of the hunting dragon. There they would have been all killed if it had not been for Bilbo at once. "Quick!" he gasped. "The door! The tunnel! It's no good here!" Roused by these words, they just were about to creep inside the tunnel when Bifur gave a cry. My cousin, Bomber and Bofur! We have forgotten them! They are down in the valley!" "They will be slain, and all of our ponies too, and all of our stores will be lost," said the others. "We can do nothing." "Nonsense," said Thorin, recovering his dignity. "We cannot leave him. Get inside, Mr. Baggins and Balin, and you too, Feely and Keely. The dragons shan't have all of us. Now you others, where are the ropes? Be quick." Those were perhaps the worst moments they had ever been through. The horrible sound of Smaug's anger were echoing in the stony halls far above. At any moment he might come blazing down, or fly whirling round and find them up there, near the perilous cliff, hauling madly up the ropes. Up came Bofur. He was all still safe. Up came Bomber, puffing and blowing while the ropes creaked, and still all was safe. Up came the tools and the bundles of stores, and the danger was upon them. A whirling noise heard. A red light touched the points of the standing rock. The dragon came. They had barely time to fly back to the tunnel, pulling and dragging their bundles, when Smaug came hurling from the north, licking the mountainsides with flame, beating at his great wings with a noise like a roaring wind. His hot breath shriveled the grass before the door and drove in through the crack that they had left and scorched them as they hid. Flickering fires leapt up and the black rock shadows danced. Then darkness fell as he had passed. The ponies screamed in terror, burst their ropes, and galloped wildly off. The dragon swooped and turned to pursue them, and was gone. "That'll be the end of our poor beast," said Thorin. "No one shall escape Smaug once he sees him. Here we are, and here we shall have to stay, unless one fancies tramping along the open miles back to the river, with Smaug at the watch." It was not a pleasant thought. They crept further down the tunnel. There they lay, shivering, though it was warm and stuffy, till dawn came pale through the crack of the door. Every now and again, through the night, they could hear the roar of the flying of the dragon grow, and then pass and fade, as he hunted round and round the mountainside. He guessed from the ponies and from the trace of the camp that he had discovered that men had come up from the river and the lake, and had scaled the mountainside from the valley where the ponies had been standing. But the door withstood his searching eye, and the little high-walled bay had kept it out of his fiercest flames. Long had he hunted in vain, until at dawn chilled his wrath, and he went back to the golden couch to sleep, and to gather new strength. For he would not forget or forgive the thief, not if 1,000 years turned him to smoldering stone. But he could afford to wait. Slow and silently he crept back to his lair, half closed his eyes. When morning came, the terror of the dwarves grew less. They realized the dangers of this kind were inevitable in dealing with such a guardian, and that it was no giving up their quest yet. Nor could they get away just now, as Thorin had pointed out. The ponies were lost or killed, and they would have to wait some time before Smaug relaxed his watch sufficiently for them to dare the long way on foot. Luckily, they had saved enough of their stores to last them still for some time. They debated long about what was to be done, but they could think of no way of getting rid of Smaug, which always had been a weak point of their plans, as Bilbo felt inclined to point out. Then, as the nature of the folk that are thoroughly perplexed, they began to grumble at the Hobbit, blaming him for what they had been first so pleased at, for bringing away a cup and stirring Smaug's wrath so soon. What else is a burglar supposed to do?" Bilbo asked angrily. "I was not engaged to kill a dragon. That is a warrior's work, but to steal treasure. I made the best beginning I could. Do you expect me to go back trot in there with the whole horde of Thror on my back? If there's any grumbling to be done, I think I might have a say. I ought to have brought 500 burglars, not one. I am sure it reflects a great credit on your grandfather, but you cannot pretend that you ever made the vast extent of your wealth clear to me. I should want hundreds and hundreds of years to bring it all up, if I was 50 times as big and Smaug was as tame as a rabbit." After that, of course, the dwarves begged his pardon. "Well, what do you suppose we do then, Mr. Baggins?" Thorin asked politely. "I have no idea at the moment. If you mean about removing the treasure, that obviously depends entirely on some new turn of luck in getting rid of Smaug. Getting rid of the dragon is not all in my line, but I will do my best to think about it. Personally, I have no hopes at all and wish I was safely back at home." Never mind for that of the moment. What are we to do today?" "Well, if you really want my advice, I should say we should do nothing except stay where we are. By day, we can no doubt creep out safely enough into the air. Perhaps before long, one or two could be chosen to go back to the store by the river and replenish our supplies. But in the meanwhile, everyone ought to be well inside the tunnel by night. Now I will make you an offer. I have got my ring, and I will creep down this very noon. Then, if perhaps Smaug ought to be sleeping, I will see what he's up to. Perhaps something will turn up. Every worm has a weak spot, as my father used to say, though I'm not sure what I know of it from personal experience." Naturally, the dwarves accepted the offer eagerly. Already they had begun to respect Bilbo. Now he had become a real leader in their adventure. He had begun to give ideas and plan his own. When midday came, he got ready for another journey down the mountain. He did not like it, of course, but it was not so bad now that he knew, more or less, what was in front of him. He had known more about dragons and their wily ways. He might have been more frightened and less hopeful of catching one. The sun was still shining when he started, and it was almost as dark as night in the tunnel. The light from the door, almost closed, was soon faded as he went down. So silent was his going that smoke on a gentle wind could have hardly surpassed it, and he was inclined to feel a bit proud of himself as he drew near to the lower door. There was only the faintest glow to be seen. "Old Smaug is weary and asleep," he thought. "He can't see me. He can't hear me. Cheer up, Bilbo." He had forgotten or had never heard about the dragon's sense of smell. It is also an awkward fact that when they keep one eye half open watching while they sleep, if they are suspicious. Smaug certainly looked fast asleep, almost dead and dark, with scarcely a snore or more than a whiff of unseen steam, when Bilbo peeped once more through the entrance. He was just about to step out into the floor when he caught a sudden thin and piercing red from under the drooping lid of Smaug's left eye. He was only pretending to be asleep. He was watching the tunnel entrance. Hurriedly, Bilbo stepped back and blessed the luck of his ring. And then Smaug spoke. All right, I know that's a bit of a cliffhanger, but that's our halfway point. Like I said, this chapter is about 20 pages long, and that's my 10th page. And if I go past, I might go, up or down on either one of these. So next time we meet, we'll have the next 10 pages, and we meet Smaug for the first time, and he can talk. Didn't know you guys knew that. So, like I said, I will upload both of these at the same time, and then you can watch them back to back. I am super excited about this because this is the culmination of their entire journey, is to go and see if they can get the treasure. And I will say, when I first read this, I wasn't sure what Bilbo's job was. I know that he was a burglar and he was going to try to get their treasure, but they have a vast treasure, and I don't think even the dwarves really knew. I think the dwarves at this point were more hoping that when they got there, that Smaug would have left or have been dead, and they could have just taken the mountain for themselves. So unfortunately, that is not the case, and we will kind of see what happens next time. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you for part 2 very soon.